How's it?
Yeah, I think give you guys a few seconds to join in here. We're gonna try to give you guys a little bit of a catch-up update here for the last 3 days of the Kīlauea, what's become now the 2020 to 2021 eruption here on the Big Island of Hawaii. And we're gonna take some questions from you guys at the very end, but we're gonna start off with the guys showing you guys what is here is a 5-second loop time lapse of the thermal imagery of the entire eruption so far. So you can kind of see that initial burst at the beginning, the real flash of steam when you're going at this speed, and the lake filling up. So that's a cool thing. I wanted to maybe just show you guys a little bit of what's going on here real quick. We're gonna kind of keep it quick today, but we'll rewind here. See, our island has been here since the very beginning. It's right here. And we have another chunk right here that actually becomes all those other submerged islands. And so if I take this and I speed it up, you can see that there's right in there, the other chunk of land that gets splashed on by all the lava. And much later on, when the flow finally changes, it re-emerge back over here. Yeah, so keep an eye on that, like that kind of splash of it right there. You can kind of see a couple of these. The two that end up over here, those two are kind of linked together, those two right there, and then these are all kind of drifting separately, but they're all connected. They're all floating in some kind of frothier lava that's got some gas trapped down there, and there's some other coatings, that kind of thing. So that's what's going on. You know, you can kind of see that in the last few days, the only thing that's really changed is this island has moved to the south and spun around, so that kind of really gives us an idea that the flow of the filling lava lake is coming in that direction here, kind of going counterclockwise. And it seemed like some periods of time it was flowing over this direction as well, kind of especially once it starts backfilling and flowing to this northern vent, which this is maybe the most interesting thing happening on the most recent thermal images. This thing is getting more and more covered, and so at some point as we see the lava lake come up, the next thing we might see happen is this thing go all the way under. That'll tell us something is actually filling in, and it doesn't appear to be draining at least near like the same rate anymore. And that's interesting, that maybe it's kind of clogged itself in that area, so maybe that's why it's able to kind of continue filling upwards and filling upwards to the height of this lower vent over here, which is also building that cone around itself as it spatters lava around, so it can get a little bit deeper right there. So that's basically it. You know, it seems like sometimes the flow does reverse all the way and the thing spins all the way this way. Maybe that's why the island is doing that little rotation right in here too. You know, we can kind of imagine that in any case, the lava flow is coming around both directions and probably flowing back this way at some deeper level, and that's what pushes the island kind of towards the vent over here. You know, similar to what it did in the initial part when it was drawn in this direction right in there. All right, so that's the thermal map. I want to show you guys one different view of this. You know, the USGS has put this out as well. This is just their thermal scans overlaid on a map, and so they kind of loop it here a couple ways, you know, kind of farther out and then zoomed in. So you can kind of see, in this case, the island right there kind of drifting around as a northern vent right here, and a western vent kind of switch off, first a northern and a western vent, right? You can kind of see it again, there and there. So one more view of that. You can kind of see that in this last view here, you see these bigger, darker plates that are forming in the crust of the lava lake. And one thing that seems to be happening, and we'll see this here as we progress through our presentation, is that the surface of the lake appears to be getting a little bit stagnant, because it seems like the plunge point of the lava where it goes in is maybe happening below the crust now. As the lava level is filling up, kind of the nozzle, that lava tube that's formed, is kind of formed an under the crust entry. So you can kind of see the entry point stays the same, but the crust is kind of forming and being lifted up. So you have that heat and that gas trying to bubble up or rise out of the lake, and so it's coming up and doing what the USGS is calling foundering here, kind of pushing up between the cracks and kind of blobbing up in between there and like lapping up and making another little layer, right? So you have this kind of amalgamation, this puzzle pieces of old pieces of intact crust combined with, you know, kind of sealed together with these little lava lapping up. So you can kind of see it happening right there at the edge. So there's their annotation for this. We'll let it play through one more time here for you guys. You can kind of just see a little more detail here. Lava blopping up in between the cracks right in here, right? The whole surface is continuing moving this way very slowly, right? But there's more movement underneath the surface as the plunge pool comes in, and that'll be more evident when we look at some of the pictures coming up a little later. All right, so moving along, we are going to show you guys the growing depth here of the lava lake. So this is a plot from the USGS webpage here, and you can kind of see that after that initial climbing up, let me change my color here to make it a little more visible. This initial kind of climbing, really quick filling, then we had a little bit of kind of up and down as we maybe were, I'm not sure exactly, maybe more gas, or it seems like fluctuations that we saw there. And then right in here is when we switched over from the northern vent to the western vent. We started having a very gradual, slow decline, and then it started coming back up again, right? And since then, you can kind of see we've kind of renewed an upward climb. And so the last report from the USGS on Twitter today is saying that the lava level was 190 meters, 623 feet deep. Right, so that's maybe 10 meters deeper than it was after that kind of stable level where it was kind of back over here where it was last week. So 10 meters, somewhere in that range, right? So that's interesting because we were talking before about how much deeper would I have to go to reach that western vent. And the thing is, it actually is building up. It's building up a little cone, so it's still got a ways to go to get up there. That's kind of the short answer, right? And so we'll look at some more of this also, but that's the main message from the USGS Twitter here. We'll move on and show you guys that they did put out a graphic a couple days ago, and you can kind of see the lava level looks pretty much the same as what you see in this image right in here, right? And so they're pointing out to us 517 meters is the very bottom of the pit. So if we add 190 to that, then that gives us the total amount right there, right? So 190 plus 517, that would put us at 707, right? So that we're kind of coming up, getting up close, yeah. So I'm kind of another view of this. There is a Volcano Watch that was put out by the USGS earlier last week, so I encourage you guys to go and read that. And I kind of would just point out the highlights, and kind of their image here is something we want to look at right away. Kind of that's showing us over here on the right that distance, right? When this was taken, it was 80 meters down below the ledge. It's maybe about 5 meters since then, so it's just a little bit higher right in there. So you can kind of see that right in the area and right in here. As we get a little bit higher, eventually we'll drown this northern vent. At that level, we'll still not be quite all the way up to this active western vent, which you can kind of see if I zoom in a little bit. We'll see better pictures here shortly, but if I zoom in a little bit and get the caption a little way here, you can kind of see we have a plunge point right in here, but no open channel anywhere in here, right? Just the vents where the gas are coming out, and this is putting out all the gas for the eruptions coming mostly out of this chimney. You don't see that much gas coming out of the lake and bubbling out, although there is gas in there. It is kind of bubbling out too at a kind of a lower rate, just not quite as intense as the concentration as is coming out of this active west vent right here. Okay, so other things the USGS actually mentions here, without going through everything and reading it all out, they kind of talk about the same patterns we've been describing in our updates for the last almost 2 weeks now. And they talk about the question of when will a lava lake be visible. And so that's where they kind of put this map right here. But I want to kind of put out here that they've noted that the eruption about a week ago was coming out at 30 cubic meters per second. Is that what they say here? Let's see. 30 cubic meters per second, 1,060 cubic feet per second about a week ago. And that had decreased down to 10 cubic meters, 353 cubic feet per second. And so they're using that 10 cubic meters as the most recent rate. And if they're saying if that was the case, at 10 cubic meters per second, it would take approximately 45 days for lava to reach the 780 meter level, becoming visible from Kīlauea Overlook, right? And so that's kind of, more or less what that is. And kind of to remind you guys, when we go back and watch our updates from last week, we had these kind of plots, looking from the north. Yes, 780 meters just about from Kīlauea Overlook to see the edge of the lake right in there. And from the south, maybe a little bit sooner than that, that's 760, right? But it's still going to be a matter of about a month out, somewhere in that range, right? And you kind of look at, this is the cross-section put out by USGS and one of their maps, and you kind of see the actual bottom of the thing is, we're right around there by 517. And our views across here are not going quite that far down because we're not looking quite quite across a very deepest part. You know, the actual better viewing angle might be slightly more this way or slightly more this way, you know, because you have a whole bunch of area to look at once that thing gets that deep. So it's just a matter of where can you see it at any point in time. All right, so how fast will it keep filling up? Because that's a big question, right? They actually at the end there say, well, it's not likely it's going to keep going at that rate for you know, forever. So that's probably just the best estimate, also to be revised upon further date. So looking at the 2-day deformation plot here, we see a downward trend, right? Our scale is from +5 to -0.3, so not quite 1 microradian deflation in 2 days. And you can kind of see that over the past week, it's been that for the last 2 days, and previous to that, kind of flattish, and maybe a little bit of a rise that had happened prior to that. So it seems like we've turned our trend around. We did see that kind of cyclicity happening here a little bit, up and down, 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 and we're not seeing that so much anymore. It seems like we've established a fairly stable pathway out without having to build up those gas bubbles anymore, which kind of was part of it as well. Although we are still seeing some of that kind of spattering happening at that western vent, as it has like a chimney and a nozzle to kind of pour into the lake. It's interesting to think about how that might be protecting that entry point against the rising lake, and how that dynamics might actually play out when we talk about, will it get deep enough to drown that vent if it goes on long enough for another couple of weeks or so. All right, so kind of just backing out, you know, here's our overall trend. We still dropped out a whole bunch more than we rose up, even on the first couple of days, and then we're kind of flattish, but slightly down is the trend overall. And GPS, it's kind of hard to see here, but you know, after our initial drop, we had come back up, and we do seem to be stabilizing a little bit also, but it's kind of too soon to tell. We'll get back to that and revisit that again in the future. Looking at some of the other tilt meters, we can see the Sand Hill Station that's on the south is showing a little bit of a rise and maybe kind of flattening out, but it's not really showing that much of a decrease at this point in time. It's kind of, if anything, kind of just flattish. You know, kind of, it still has to turn around some more for us to see the propagating effects from inwards to outwards of the thing deflating as it relieves pressure from having a good way to get the lava out now. Is essentially what's happening as far as it being stable. Our Kīlauea station that we were looking at last week as well, that had started off with a general downwards, brief upwards, has gone back down again. So it continues its trend again. SO2 emissions, we have a new data point from USGS here that went up a little bit. I want to say 6,800 is the number, 6,300 is the number. Still kind of in this range of what's the low background levels of the lava lake that existed back in the 2008 to 2018 era. Overall, the pattern still being much higher at the beginning, dropping off, and now we're kind of waiting to see where this leads here, how far this can kind of draw out there. And so that is kind of what we imagine our emission rate. And so when we think about maybe a 30 meters per second compared to a 10, you know, that's kind of the relative difference. You know, we're looking at something like that, 30 to, you know, something like that. So still unknown how long it's going to go on. You know, it does seem to be still continuing, but the big difference, of course, being this tilt right here, right? And so if we see this tilt continuing going downwards, that's what's required for the eruption to eventually end. And so, you know, it's not going very fast, but it is trending that direction. So kind of that's the stable thing for now until it kind of either peters out or reaches that western vent. And we'll just have to wait and see. All right, so seismically, we still are seeing some of this cyclicity we reported on a few days ago with activity first at Byron's Ledge, just a little bit further south, and the Hat Station slightly further north and slightly farther away. So you kind of see it happen one and the other, right? So, and you still see some of these kind of bursts of gas coming out. That's more of that kind of Strombolian kind of spattering coming out that we mentioned in our last update as well, right? So you can kind of see there's still kind of some pattern of presumably more gas-rich lava coming out at some of these intervals, right? And moving through towards the vent, and actually going to be coming out of the vent in some kind of spattering regime right through here, and more Strombolian regime, and then maybe more gas venting and frothiness through there as well. Okay, so in case you're wondering, I'm just going to show you guys if this will reload here. I want to show you guys where those two stations are very quickly. And There it is. So on here, eruption site is down in here. Right, the lava is filling the pit over here. And this is the Byron's lead station, and this is the head station. This is the one that's showing first, and this is the one that's showing second, right? So our intrusion source was back over here, December 2nd, and this is a month ago today, right? 1 month anniversary of that. So there's some open magma connection to here as well as to here, and then that's why the station's filling it first, and this one's filling it second, slightly afterwards. So that'll make sense. Our biggest impacts of the eruption are still gas and emissions, right? Besides the actual particulates that are put out by the bubbles throwing lava into the air and little bits of lava getting carried in the wind. You also have the SO2 that flies in the air, reacts with the water vapor in the air and the sunlight, and makes particulates that are the VOG itself. It's more, it's a kind of a chemical reaction stuff, particle that forms rather than actually being put out as a particle from a volcano. So you can kind of see here on the Kona side, there's still quite a bit of elevated emissions of SO2 and particulates. This is actually the PM 2.5, which is the particulate matter, right? More so than the SO2 right there. And so the park, everything is in the green, so everything is looking okay in the park. Anyone who's visiting the park. But quickly looking at our VOG model, you can kind of see that our emission source, this is kind of looking at one day, our emission source is kind of pushing things this way, right? But there's like a backflow that keeps things collecting in this Kona side of the island, the downwind leeward side of Hawaiʻi Island, right over there. And that's why the VOG is kind of lingering, persisting over there. And even if the emissions have been lower coming out of here, there's no relief because it's not clearing out, right? It's kind of just staying around, and so you kind of just add a little bit more and add a little bit more, and so it kind of just stays bad all the time. All right, so get to your questions here soon, but first let's review the earthquakes. You can kind of see that there's not a whole lot of earthquakes. We still have our Pahala background activity, a couple on Mauna Loa, but nothing really to speak of. A few more at Kīlauea Summit, more so than we've been seeing, and one on the south flank. So we can kind of zoom into those and see that there's just there's one there, 1.8, 1.8, 1.8, 2.0. Fairly shallow, so that's kind of probably some adjustment to the emptying chamber now, emptying spot that's filling the lava lake right in here. And kind of the patterns are still overall that our earthquake levels are down quite a bit from what they were before this eruption, right? So you guys can see that. All right, kind of finishing off here, just going to show you guys some of these photographs from USGS, and then we'll take your questions. This was on the 31st, on New Year's Eve, so you can kind of see the lava still filling in. There's a lava lake, southern vent. That kind of spattering spot is over here on that south end. It's kind of around a corner from this western vent, or this northern vent right over here that we imagine might have been a drain back spot. So it's interesting, if that's the case, if that's the kind of spattering regime we saw from the downwelling that we, of the diagrams I showed you guys last week of how that actually, you can have spattering happening on the far side from the upwelling. The difference being we don't have an upwelling, we have a plunge pool, essentially a plunge point where things are kind of pouring in from above right in there. And then it can kind of circulate around the edges that way, and then kind of push back over here. But it also can have an overall circulation that puts gas up, right? All the lava that's coming up, or coming in, right, is getting pushed over, and the gas is able to come out finally over here as a second gas point, major gas point beyond this original one over here. So that's interesting. Zooming in, you can kind of see there's our western vent. You can kind of see some cones, spatter cones, as a lava that falls around that hole builds up, that spire around it. And down here you see the plunge point, right? It's kind of unclear exactly if it's plunging straight into it or if it's coming from right below there and then coming up and rising up, upwelling right in that point right in there. But clearly that's the source of where everything is going at. It's a nice zigzag pattern right in there. So, work of art there, yeah, nature's art. Right, similar view there, not to belabor it there, so interesting thing here, right? This is the view I'm more interested in right here, is whether that particular northern vent, let's see, I maybe shouldn't have reloaded that, but that northern vent there is going to be all the way drowning, so I want to compare it from a couple days ago to the view we're going to have here today. So let's see, my connection's a little bit slow today. And it might fail. Okay, let's just go back and do it this way. So you can kind of see right in there, we still have a little bit of that that spatter cone that formed around like where lava was falling down from bubbling out right there. It's still stuck to the wall of the crater. That's still visible, right? But that's kind of what we're going to look at, disappearing as a lava level comes up slowly over the next week or so. All right, so, and then we have some more things about the foundering. We talked about that a little bit and showed you guys a video. So you guys can go and look at those in more detail as well as that nice rainbow picture. So from New Year's Day here, we have a comparison how in the last week, from the 27th to the 1st, you really don't see a whole lot of change in the lava level, a little bit different in the shape, kind of, especially in the area right in here, but that's just more so like they have that ledge, and the ledge is being overflowed, right? But otherwise, not that much difference in the extent or the depth of the thing. And the USGS did adjust the, I don't know if we mentioned this before, they did adjust their camera so they have a little bit better view, and it's not so washed out in the evening, so that was very much appreciated, that they are catering to their audience here. And of course, we're showing you guys all this USGS data from the USGS website. So, time-lapse video here of the glow from that summit camera, and something you can go check out on their website yourself. Comparisons of thermal cameras, more views of the island, and here's an interesting thing. You know, I can actually see that as in the 2018 eruption, they continue to deploy more equipment, right, to try to learn more about the volcano. In this case, this is a seismic instrument they're deploying to try to get more information about how the magma is moving besides just the two stations that we're looking at on our updates here, right? So they have way more information available and can then do more calculations about, you know, how much and how far for this deformation on this side and that side, and this kind of signals and all of that. So without getting too technical about it. So here are the views, the images from today. So from early this morning, you can see there's that kind of chimney western vent right there, and a plunge point right below there with that kind of gap right in between there. And I might change my color and be more visible as well. And the island has been kind of drawn towards it, presumably by the current. It's a little bit deeper, pushing the bottom of that thing. That's, you know, not just a surface. A surface part of it is actually a lot of these slabs. You see these longer points of flow with, you know, faster margins on the sides here and kind of below the point of view over here. And then you kind of see more chunky slabs with the other islands in between, and this far edge is kind of the lava is sinking down and kind of going below that crust and still coming up and splitting it apart, right? And you kind of see that all across. But that's what you're seeing over there. So close-up view, that's exactly that same point. There's that gap, right? That kind of tubed over when the lava's coming up from depth and then going down like this. Right? Maybe not coming all the way up, but in some way, you know, eventually it'll erode or, you know, wear down and, you know, make some kind of shape through there that's kind of unknown to us at this point in time. And so that'll be interesting to see how as lava level comes up, how this point changes, right? Because in theory, you could come all the way up to here still and still have an upwelling point that comes from below, or break open some of this rock over here, something like that. So that's kind of, you know, what we have to look for is how these vents, the western vent and that northern vent also that's getting drawn will change, right? So this northern vent that's right in here, in this image, maybe a little bit harder to see. Let's see if I have it over here. Yeah. So you see the lava level there. It's coming up, and there's only a little bit of that thing left. Right? So when we look at the thermal, we can kind of see one point, another point going like that, and kind of look for those points and see when it actually disappear as they retreat further back and in to the edge. So okay, a couple more pictures here. You can see the USGS is also comparing a lot of that before and after, and kind of they have an animated GIF here showing a little bit of that Strombolian kind of spattering action, right? You see all this continual gas venting coming out, and then once in a while, one of those bigger slugs of gas comes up, and it kind of coughs up like all this lava, right? And you see how it's falling down. It's lava's not falling, and it's, you know, you can see it's actually bouncing off. Some of it's trying to stick, but it's bouncing and rolling down a steep hill, right? Kind of that sticky lava right in there. All right, so there's just one USGS question that's going to pull out from, you know, their feeds today, and it's kind of just to confirm where this information is coming from. Question came in: does a rise in lava lake level indicate the north vent that had drained the lake earlier is now sealed and cannot drain the lake? And then, seems like it, yes. So pretty simple there. And at this point, I'll bring in Dane, who's been monitoring the chat on YouTube and Facebook. Thank you guys for joining us, and answer a few questions before we sign off for you guys, and come back to you guys again in a few days here during a new week and see what more information we have. Share with you guys. We're not going to do any historical thing today as well. So we are brought to you by Hawaii Tracker, hawaiitracker.com. You can go check us out on that website, and we'll post everything there as well as other interesting stuff as well.
Right. Yeah, and thanks, Phil, for going through it. For getting into the questions, just like to thank those that support us to help keep this show going. If you want to support this type of program, the way to do so is on hawaiitracker.com/support. Right, and we have some new donors today. Thank you again, Daniel L, or KD, Craig L, and Jeremy B. And with that, let's get into some questions. So, not a lot going on in the questions, but do have some good ones. Eric asked about the island in the lava lake. Is it the island made of pumice, or what is it?
Yeah, it's something along those lines, right? It's something like a pumice that essentially has a lot of gas trapped in essentially some lava matrix that's around there, right? Exactly what it is, we'll have to wait and see. Someday maybe get a sample of that, whether it's more the tephra or the center. But you can really see from the very beginning here, and I can maybe pause this and well, maybe I'll let it loop so I can find the marker here, right? If I can, for a moment, the steam clears here at the beginning, even here before that, right? Like this very frame right here, we see suddenly there's a dark spot right in the middle of our lava right in there. So it's something that happened at the very, very beginning, when the lava was interacting in that pond. And from there it is already in that very first frame, that dark spot right there in the middle. So it probably is something like that, something that's very frothy and kind of coated in lava. Where exactly you'd call it a pumice, that might depend on the vesicularity and the matrix and all of that. And so I'm not as confident to say, the exact terminology it should be called, but it is something along those lines, yeah.
All right. So Kanoa asks if there's any predictions on when the lava will cover the other vent, the western vent.
Well, I haven't done the calculations. That's something we can kind of do for you guys for the next time. We can resume our lava lake filling model. Now that it seems like we're back to some kind of equilibrium. Before it was, there was a back and forth between the northern vent draining things back over here, and it seems like it's not doing that anymore. Now it's actually possible to do that model a little more simply. So we'll pick that up for you guys. But just kind of gut feeling. A few weeks, somewhere in that range, right? A few weeks to a month. Something like that, for to get up another, I'm not sure how far it's got to come, 10 meters, 15 meters?
Yeah, it depends, because that's the interesting thing about it, is because it's built that spatter cone around it, so right. It's elevated itself, which is kind of like a false idea of the level of it, right? Where the lava is actually at, and where like the weight of the lava lake, would collapse into, and things like that, those kind of dynamics. But just looking at, if I'm just going to do some back of the envelope type stuff, and we're seeing, only a few feet a day on average, it could be month to 3 months away from that. It could be a little less if it picks up, because the one thing is on the December 31st measurement, even if you took the high end from USGS on that, they were saying 608 feet deep, the lake. And then on January 1st, it was 620. So if it keeps up that rate, or it's doing like 12 feet a day, well, then it's, doesn't take that long. But it's been seeming to be very inconsistent on, raising, flattening off, even lowering.
Right. So we'll have to see if that increase that's held up in the last few days holds up. And, if that's the case, then it's maybe what a month at, something like that. Yeah.
Right.
So.
All right. Michael Phillips from Weather Boy and Big Island Press Club asks, could the heat and the weight of the lava lake create more weakness below it, allowing fingers to feed the lake from the bottom rather than just the open vents on the side?
It seems unlikely to me, because you already have weaknesses that are there, and it's more about exploiting them, right? And I think that kind of the question that I think is interesting that kind of is implied by what Michael just asked is, what about the vent that's down over here that's all the way buried, right? And the one that's all the way down here that's all the way buried, and the one that's down here that's all the way buried, right? Those things, if they have been draining lava, could open up and actually become bigger openings that could feed things from below in the long term, potentially, if things were to continue to be fed, the dynamics change around, so you have to kind of wait and see how it all plays out. But there are already weaknesses that are there that possibly could be exploited, we did see the northern vent turn off already. And so, yeah, who's to say that this upper western vent couldn't turn off and it couldn't come in at the bottom from one of these other places? That seems in the realm of possibility, but I think we'd have to see some other reason for that to change first, and it's easier for it to come out of this spot clearly now, although we really have no idea if it's also coming out down over there and down over there.
Those lower vents, the ones that were covered, in a few days, if they were draining lava down them, they would be like a way to widen the vent in there,
right?
Just by the lava dragging through, and kind of the inverse of the widening of the fissure 8 vent, where lava's pushing up and widening the vent, lava's draining down, still widening the vent.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, lava does have that same mass as the cooled rock, even when it's liquid. So if you take that, imagine taking that rock and kind of scraping it across that opening over and over and over, however many times, however much lava is draining back in there, then yeah, you could certainly erode it that way as well. Plus, it's got little bubbles that make it kind of add to the friction, make it a rougher. That changes the pressure, so that's totally possible as well. But it's all about a question of, can you keep is the flow continuing going through there? Because as we may be seeing with the northern vent, if the flow slows down enough, then maybe that just kind of stops going there, and let's say the gas can move around, bypass it entirely, where that path stays stagnant, then it could actually clog as well, right? And then you wouldn't, then you might just pour in from the top that whole time. So it's, to me, it's more likely we're going to see the lava lake if it goes on indefinitely. Let's say it keeps this kind of rate, a low rate, for a long time. It would have to rise up and actually drown that western vent, and then how much pressure does the western vent have to actually come through it? And then we might see more cyclicity happening from that point on. Now that you have no vents above the lava level, we might see more of the Kīlauea style, where it starts, stops. Although I don't expect to see that kind of level of fountaining, since we haven't seen anything like that. That pressure. We just don't have the cap to build that kind of pressure for that high fountaining right now.
All right, so question from YouTube. Do you think it is normal? This is like more meta scale. Do you think it's normal with all the volcanic activity happening at the world currently? Would that be considered normal?
I would say absolutely yes. And if you've been watching us for long enough, probably not a whole lot of you guys have, but we've answered this question, I don't know how many times before, half dozen times before already, and every time it's the same answer. It's like, what about now? Well, what about now? Well, what about now? What about now? Well, what about now? So it's like that all the time. And it's kind of cool that we get to see more of it because of modern technology and satellites. We don't miss anything, and everyone's got a cell phone, and everything's reported, and we can look at satellites for everything everywhere, all the time. So we don't, that's cool. We have deployed thermal webcams. We have all kinds of stuff that we have to look at. So there's a lot more media just in general. So you hear a lot about it a lot more, and a lot more photographers going. So I think that's part of it as well. But yeah, it's normal.
All right. So this is the final question I have lined up right now from Andrew. He questions about the lava lake and the weight of it pushing down. Is that causing some kind of slow, small-scale collapse?
There possibly could be some space on there, only if you imagine how much gas is being vented out, right? Kind of, there's like some kind of net. But overall, the amount of rock that's in that pit is not that much compared to the weight of rock that's everywhere around it, that creating the landscape that it's in. It's also above the magma chamber. It's also holding it in. So this is just, I don't know, maybe you add 0.5%, or I don't know, if that. It's not going to change that much, really, when it comes down to it. What you might see is after the eruption is over, some of the gas that's trapped in a lava lake might then kind of vent out, and you might see the surface kind of collapse on a smaller scale, right? Not like huge amounts, but, you know, a little bit. 10 meters maybe at most, you know, something like that. So thank you guys for that round of question. Thank you guys for supporting us in our work. You know, keep it short tonight. We'll be back to you guys in a couple of days, and we'll see what else there is to share. We'll maybe add some more historical information and take more of that kind of background information as well. Anything else, Dane, before we sign off here?
That's all for me.
All right. Thank you, guys. So from Hawaii Tracker, hawaiitracker.com, I'm Philip Ong. For Dane DuPont, aloha.